with our first guest. She's had a front row seat to the greatest changes Dallas has seen recently, the 4-time city councilwoman, and she's the founding executive director of the Dallas Arts District. She's been at the forefront of many changes, particularly with the GLBT community and equal rights. I've always thought of her as Veletta Forsythe Lill because of her ability to see the future and the way Dallas ought to look. She's a staunch supporter of us, and I hope you will help me welcome our friend, the Honorable Veletta Forsythe Lill.
I wish I would have worn better shoes. Take them off? Who said that? Good evening. It's so great to see so many friends in the audience. And I've admitted to Steve and to John, I just have all these butterflies. And I'm used to speaking publicly, but tonight, before my friends, is particularly special for me. As Earl Robert introduced me, I'm Veletta Forsythe Lill, and I am the, quote, hand-picked successor of Dallas's first openly gay council member. Seriously, that's the way the Dallas Morning News introduced me in a profile when I began running for public office. That description probably placed me in the public's eye as gay-friendly, but it had been a long journey to get to that point, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that tonight. Going all the way back, born as the only child of the 2 youngest children of 2 Midwestern farm families, I found myself operating from an early age in multiple worlds. The Stewarts and the Forsythes, my parents' families, had both been among the families that homesteaded Illinois, and they had deep roots in the Illinois soil. My mother, a young nursing student at a Catholic hospital, married her high school sweetheart, my father, who was, quote, a character. He was born on a farm but yearned for the big city. And he was handsome and he was smart and smooth talking. And for 12 years they were together, and by spring and fall and summer, they farmed family farms, and in the winter they went to Chicago to work in factories and diners to save money. 2 years after I came along, my father departed. He moved on to Chicago, and I was left with my mother, who was at this point, and it's 1955, is a divorcee in a small town with an extended family, and we begin our journey. There wasn't any child care, and so my extended family took care of me, and babysitters took care of me. And my mother worked multiple jobs because neither my father's presence nor his child support payments were always on time. He had lots of acquaintances, though, but few close friends. He gambled and he drank, and he excelled at selling damn near anything. He wrecked cars and he closed deals, and he made friends with mobsters and Skid Row inhabitants. He would show up in my grade school in a big fin Cadillac with a Marilyn Monroe look-alike in the front seat, and then disappear for 6 months. The following day, my grandfather in his gumboots, who had just slopped the hogs, would show up to pick me up. These indeed were the two worlds that I lived in. My mother was honest and hardworking and truthful, funny, and terminally cheery. And she and my father both gave me a sense of humor. As I said, at an early age, I realized we weren't like other families for a variety of reasons. And this is small town America in the 1950s. My mother would later remarry, and she would marry a man who was wonderful and supportive and did everything to emulate Ward Cleaver, but he did have a disability, so we were further different from most people. I found myself in books. And so, as a youngster, I went directly to reading about Illinois' homeboy, Abraham Lincoln. My babysitter told my mother that I had an unhealthy interest in Mr. Lincoln, which probably prophesied that indeed I would go into politics. I was about 5 years old, and I've always had this sense of being indignant about injustice. And I was improperly accused of breaking my neighbor, Mrs. Fishwick's, honest to God, that was her name, bird bath, and my mother punished me. Oh, I was incensed. I packed my ballet bag with my finest tutu and my ballet slippers and my favorite storybook and my favorite stuffed animal, and set out to my grandparents, who I knew would never punish me for anything. That should have told me at that time, I bristle at injustice, I love good luggage, and I do like to take a pair along of good shoes. Growing up in the 50s and 60s was an interesting time, and gliding back and forth between Chicago and downstate Illinois gave me an unbelievable idea of what was going on in America, and books were to transport me. And as I got older, I left Abraham Lincoln and I read Malcolm X and Eldridge Cleaver's Soul on Ice and the readings of the Chicago Seven. So I had a different view of politics at that time as well. These years were tumultuous in America, not only where I lived, but where we all lived. Vietnam veterans went into the dead zone. My friends, who at that time were gay, had to make that choice of whether they would out themselves and say they were gay, so not to go, whether they would go to Canada or whether they would go to war. All of this proceeded through my college years of studying sociology and government and finally public health and campus discussions, govern and so forth. And but I did not find myself early to the LGBT movement. How I found myself there was through my friends. I received a governor's fellowship student at the University of Illinois. And I went to work for the Illinois Department of Public Health one summer. And I was assigned a man who traveled around central Illinois and inspected migrant labor camps. I got a first-hand look at the impact of the Catholic Church on migrant workers, of the conditions that they lived in. But Frank was African-American, gay, vegan, and he spoke 4 languages. Not your regular guy in the farm community. We weren't always welcomed at cafes. We got our car bumped into more than one time. Frank would go on to help me plan my wedding. And we would later, he took me to my first gay bar, and we would lose him to AIDS later on. I want to say that I have found many of my friends in the gay community, and that's not saying, you know, some of my best friends are gay. It's to say they've truly been my friends. When I first arrived here, Tony Hoover was my first friend at Fidelity Investments. I also was a transfer provisional junior leaguer. So some nights I would spend at JR's and some nights I would spend at the junior league headquarters on Inwood Road. I was also involved in neighborhood activism. Neighborhood zoning cases, historic preservation, public housing, all those kinds of things. And Craig McDaniel became my friend through that. Craig McDaniel, Rob Parks, Hector Garcia, people who would later go on to be my appointees on city boards and commissions. Lori Palmer appointed me to the Human Services Commission to give me a taste of what it was like to serve on any kind of board or commission. Hector Garcia was my good friend there, and guess who should show up to be appointed by Miss Bloomer? Kathy Adams. Many of you may remember Kathy. This was about 1992, 1993, and Kathy had interesting views on condoms and AIDS. As Craig continued to serve, or as Craig had appointed me, and I want to go back a moment as what happened when he runs for council. He makes this decision to run for council, and because I'd been a friend through neighborhood activism, I'm invited into the circle that sat around at Hector Garcia and Craig Holcomb's house. And there are a number of you in this room that sat in there. And we grilled him for months on end on what he was going to say, what was his vision, and was he gay? So we prepared Craig for those questions. But Craig wanted you to know that he came from neighborhood activism, and he happened to be gay. He was not coming as the gay candidate. He was coming as the neighborhood activist. He's elected. He serves 2 terms. He's there when the first non-discrimination ordinance is passed for city workers. He's there when the settlement for the Micah England case occurs. He was there for victories, but he was also there for the death threats, for the bricks, for the sly remarks. But he mentored me to prepare me to succeed him, to be an advocate for both those neighborhoods and for the gay community. Being a representative of District 14 meant more than you had to march in the parade. Although I have to tell you, I've marched, I've driven, my husband has driven me, my son has ridden with me, I've been in horse-drawn carriages, pickup trucks. I've been the Grand Marshal. I've been the judge. I've done it all. I've ridden in classic cars, and my friends George and Jack brought me beautiful pictures of one of my rides in the parade. But just showing up isn't enough for an elected official or an appointed official. You need to be engaged. And I was prepared to do that as we moved through and we did things like the non-discrimination ordinance for housing, for accommodations, to teach the police department how to be more sympathetic, right, John Wimberly? To get people to understand why discrimination is wrong, not just for some folks, but for everyone. And I had the opportunity to work with many of you in this room. And sometimes my friend Ed Oakley would say, it's easier for you to carry it because you're straight. It's easier for you to say, we need benefits for partners. We need these things. And it's easier sometimes when you're out on the outside looking in. But having a community that gets together and marches with you and working with the likes of John Wimberly and Steve Atkinson and Patty Fink and people like that, and indeed engaging the business community. We asked Don Carty, the head of the largest private employer in this region, to come down to testify, because it's important to have people in the business community to support what we do. It's important to have the legal community like Barbara Rosenberg and David Schultz and John Rogers and guys like that, who were there to help us write the ordinances. This is the dull stuff, folks. Sitting in rooms, picking apart words that will forever protect people's lives. And I want to say, we're really, really, really close. Victory. I was on the council when Lawrence v. Texas fell. We're ready for the big one in the Supreme Court. But today is, what day is today? 22nd. It's the day, it's the anniversary of Roe v. Wade. And this very day, Congress, the House of Representatives, passed a law, or indeed out of the House of Representatives, to restrict a woman's right to choose. If you've seen Selma and you've seen Ferguson, you know things haven't changed all that much. So vigilance regarding your rights and keeping your friends close are extremely important as you move forward, because we can never rest after we succeed. Thank you.
Atmosphere like, tell me what was happening to the gay community at the hands of the Dallas police before you started to talk to them.
I thought you were going to ask me about string theory.
Later.
No, I don't want to. I want to clarify. I did not start this program. Dallas Gay and Lesbian Alliance had started it. We were getting involved in more. I was trying to get people to participate more in it. So we had an interesting time getting that to happen. But that's how I met Steve, because he was one of the people that I got to come speak to the police department. But it was. I wasn't as familiar with what was going on in the bars, but people know the stories about, we've heard before about people getting the license plates taken down when that was happening. But the police department was, because of Micah England, the Micah England case, we knew that we had a lot of work to do. And what my role was to try to get them to understand and appreciate that we were part of the community too. And that was by, there were no openly gay police officers, so we needed people to come in and talk and let them see what a gay person was like, not the people they were busting in the parks for having sex. And I would say, if you're going to bust a gay person for having sex in the park, you need to be busting the straight people for doing it too, rather than giving a warning. But so that was the situation we were in.
And to whom did you speak at the police department to even begin this dialogue?
Well, the first thing that we had gotten involved in was called a community unity, where they were having other people from the community come and talk. Everyone in the police department had to participate. And I did once, I did one meeting where I was part of it. It was like a 2 or 3 day program, and I had been an activist with Guts, Gay Urban Truth Squad, that we had done the Judge Hampton. It was a great protest, But that was the first time anyone had ever asked me these questions to my face, like, God says that you're going to be put to death. And I was like, I didn't know how to respond. And they really treated me. I was the only openly gay person in the group of people there that was talking to them, and I just felt like they treated me with such disrespect that I was really, really angry. And it's not good to get me angry, because I decided I was going to make a difference. And so from that moment on, I wanted to make sure there was going to be gay people at every one of their meetings. They met for about 2 years, and I went to so many different groups of gay people and said, please, we need you to come. I know it's a lot, but just come take a couple of days out. And almost every single one of the meetings had a gay or lesbian person there.
And that story can feel a little bit discouraging, but it has an incredibly happy ending. And in order for you to know that, you must come to another Dallas Way meeting. So
He's pressuring.
thank you. Yes, just a little teaser, because we've got to get John's story.